Greetings, everyone. My name is Peter Young. I'm a member of the Committee 100 and also a board member, and also happen to be head of the Asian American Career Ceilings Initiative of the Committee 100. I'm very pleased that you're joining us this evening for a very interesting report on the findings of the survey we did on Asian American career ceilings. It is done very carefully, but also I think you're going to find the results very interesting. In many cases, the data will confirm things that people, their gut feel says, well, I think this is true. And in other cases, there are some surprising results or some results that just confirm perhaps that our theories are different. So what I'd like to do is take you through some slides that really summarize the methodology, but also what the findings were for the group as a whole. Um, I also want to tell you that we have divided the report into two parts. You're going to see the first part this evening, and that's the one that goes through the methodology, how we conducted the survey, and what the overall results were. On December 11th, we're going to do a second presentation, also at 6 o'clock Eastern Time, and that's going to go underneath and look at subgroups and cross tabulations and what that means. So in other words, what you'll see this evening is what the survey group as a whole, how they felt about Asian American career ceilings, what type of problem they faced, what they thought the reasons were. On December 11th, part two, we're going to go through whether that's different based on gender or age or seniority or the kind of industry that the survey person was in. I think you're going to find it very interesting, both part one and part two. Actually, part two is very interesting. There's some real differences between professions and age groups and so forth that I think you're going to find very interesting. For part two, the link to register was on the invitation that you responded to, and many of you already registered. So without much delay, I'm going to share with you the title page. And as it says here, part one, methodology and key findings. And again, this is part of the Asian American Career Ceilings Initiative of the Committee of 100. Here is a table of contents, the background as to why we did this, scope and methodology, staffing and execution. We'll actually show you the survey questions that were asked, and a profile of the people who responded to the survey. And then the last two are key findings and conclusions and implications. So let's go ahead and go through this. So many of you are quite familiar with Committee 100. I think many of you attended many of our webcasts and summits, et cetera, that we started in 2020. And the goal was to disseminate research and studies that have been conducted to provide a platform for experts to share their views, to conduct interviews of people from a variety of professions about their experiences and advice and how they might be different if you're in entertainment or investment banking or teaching, to gather leaders together to share insights and to come up with new ways to solve the problem and to implement various programs directed at reducing the career ceiling problem for Asian Americans and to help individuals overcome the problem. And that we've done shifted very heavily into solutions, workshops, summits, and things that will try to attack the problem. About 2 years ago, we did a very informal survey of the people who attended one of our events. And those results were interesting, but obviously it was just a very informal survey. So it really couldn't conclude definitively what it meant. So we decided, however, to do a formal survey of a much larger group and done in a professional manner with regard to methodologies used and legitimate findings. And as again, this part one that you're going to see this evening covers the methodology and key findings from the data of the survey group as a whole. And then December 11th, this part two will look at subgroup differences. by gender, age group, seniority type of organization, as well as some written suggestions that people wrote in anecdotally about what they thought solutions could be. I want to point out that this survey was done quite carefully, following professional methods, but you should come away with it feeling that this survey reflects the opinions of the respondents of the survey. We do not claim that this represents all Asian Americans, because that would be a very different kind of survey. So what methodology do we use? Well, there are a number of principles about how you can do surveys effectively. One is don't do long surveys. So we created one that only takes 5 to 10 minutes to complete. We tested with quite a number of people to make sure that that was true. And in fact, the total number of questions was only 15. The first 8 were what they call characterizing questions. In other words, what ethnicity, gender, age group, etc. So it wasn't asking opinions, just trying to understand who the surveyor was, not by name, but by category. And then we had 7 questions at the end where we asked whether the respondents felt they had been subjected to a career ceiling obstacle based on ethnicity, what they thought was the reason they had suffered the obstacle, the severity of the career obstacle experience, how bad or how less severe it was, but also what they thought were potential solutions to the problem and whether there was an incident they'd like to cite to share with us. This survey was primarily distributed to individuals who had registered for one or more of the Committee 100 Asian American Career Ceiling Program events since the program started in 2020. In total, we got a good number of responses. 251 completed the survey. And because of the system we use, we were able to track how long it took. In fact, on average, it took 6 minutes with a range of 5 to 10 minutes. What's very important, if you look at methodology for surveys, it's important not to provide any compensation. And a lot of surveys that people do, they compensate the surveyor one way or the other. And the professional people who understand methodology for surveys, they all say that if you do that, you create a bias. The only thing we promised, as you know, for those of you who took the survey, was that we would send a final report when it became available. The other thing, which is very important for surveys, which is quite obvious, is that you want to design them so they do not convey a bias or lead a respondent to answer in any particular way. By the way, it's so easy to violate this principle. If you've ever taken surveys, other surveys, there are times where it's quite obvious that either on purpose or accidentally, they skew the surveyed person in one direction. The other thing that's very important, it's kind of a subtle aspect of surveys, is all the questions were designed that no matter who the respondent was, they always had a selection that they could make, even if it was other preferred not to say. For example, we had gender, and we gave people the option not only to say whether they're female or male, but also to say whether they preferred not to say or they felt they were in other category. This is important because otherwise you distort the answers. Because if someone doesn't identify themselves as female or male, and you don't give them any other choice, it distorts the responses. For the last 2 questions, they were write-in questions. They were not multiple choice, and respondents could write in either their view of what the solutions might be, and we had 143 written responses, and also they had the option to share an incident that they felt was worth conveying. And we're very pleased that 131 of the surveyed people wrote in a response. And why did we do this? Well, quite frankly, because things like what the solutions might be, it's impossible to compile a multiple choice set of choices that's complete. So instead, we have write-in, and we're also very careful that if you do that, then you're not allowed to do anything except use them as anecdotal stories. They're still very useful as anecdotes, but you really can't conclude beyond that. And we'll show you a few examples of what people's responses were when we get to part 2. The construction of the survey and its execution was done by and funded by myself, and all the works performed by the experienced experts at my firm. We're an investment banking and corporate strategy firm, and so obviously we do extensive quantitative and statistical analyses. So the folks who worked on this were quite expert. But also, after we put together the preliminary survey and methodology, reviewed it with Jeremy Wu, who is a Committee of 100 member, so that he could review the methodologies used and the technical validity of the results. Jeremy Wu is a leading expert on surveys and analyses. He was a senior member of various parts of the U.S. government, but more importantly, he was a senior member of the Census Bureau, which obviously they're world-class experts on how you survey people. In fact, he got many awards for the innovations that he did while he was there. And this survey was completed over a period of 6 weeks. So what were the survey questions? Well, here they are. Here are the 7. And the first was, do you feel that your career success has been impeded in any way because of your ethnicity? Second, if so, what form of career disadvantage do you feel you've been subjected to? And we gave people the opportunity to check all that applied. Third was, what do you feel was the cause of the career disadvantage? And then we had 2 that were on a scale of 0 to 10. The first said, over the last 5 years, on a scale of 0 to 10, what level of severity do you feel they've been subjected to with regard to Asian American career ceilings obstacles? Then we had another one that was on a scale of 0 to 10, which says, do you feel that the current tensions between the US and China and Asia hate incidences had any impact on your career success? Again, 0 to 10. And then the last 2 were the write-ins, that are anecdotal. Do you have a specific incident that you want to cite? And last, what's your view of the solutions that should be or could be implemented? So let's go and take a look at what the data said. So the first question, in terms of the categorizing questions, is we asked them, do you identify as an Asian American? Interestingly, 99% of those who filled out the survey said they identified as Asian American. So that's good because we're trying to survey Asian Americans. Then we asked, if in fact the answer is yes, please check off all of the sub-ethnic Asian categories you identify with. And you see here we had all of the major countries. We also had other, by the way, but we didn't have anyone fill in. And you see there's Vietnamese, there's Korean, Japanese, Indian, Filipino, but the largest group by far were Chinese, which is neither here nor there. It just says the largest group were Chinese. Chinese. We then asked them, if you identify as an American, check off one of the following. And exactly half said, I immigrated to the US, and half said, I was born in the US. So it's an interesting mix. And then we said, what gender do you identify with? Again, we've left off the other and preferred not to say, just because one was 0 and one was like 2. So it would be hard to graph. But of those who answered this, 59% said they were female and 41% said they were male. And there's nothing to draw from that other than that it wasn't skewed one way or the other. We didn't have 90% female and 10% male, which then would really question the validity of the survey. We then asked people to give us a sense about age group. Now, one thing you don't do in a survey is you don't ask them their exact age. If you do that, you create serious problems and trust problems. Instead, we just ask people to identify in 10-year ranges, except for the top, which is above 61 or above. And it's very interesting what you see here. So if you take a look here, you'll see there's a very good representation of people when 21 to, 31 to 40, 41 to 50, et cetera, all the way up. Now, the only group that was very small were the people between 21 and 30. But we don't mind that because that, to be honest with you, that's not we did try to exclude them, but that's not our target group in the sense that because they just started their careers, so it's less likely that they'll be able to comment about career obstacles because, as you know, Asian Americans do fine at the entry level. It's just as they proceed in their career that they run into problems. So this was actually helpful to know, but it also tells you that we have a broad set of ages. So when we do the cross tabulation, in part two, you'll see differences in responses based on age. We also then asked them, are you currently working? And 84% said they were, and 16% said that they were not. It could be they were unemployed, could be they were retired, a variety of reasons, but the vast majority were essentially still in the workforce. Then we also asked them, if you're working, in what profession are you working? And it's very interesting. So we had corporate, nonprofit, teaching, government, self-employed. Now, it's not surprising that the largest group was corporate because that's what most of the jobs are in this country. But we did get a decent representation of these other groups, it's government, teaching, and nonprofit, et cetera. So a fair representation and nothing surprising. Then we asked them what level did they reach? What level have you achieved thus far, right? And we went from entry level to mid-level to senior level to head of the organization. Now, not surprising, entry level was a small number, but that correlates well with the fact that a smaller group of young people answered the survey. What's interesting is we got a very good mix and representation across these three levels. What surprised me, to be honest, I didn't expect to get as many people who were head of the organization, CEO or president and so forth. But we're very pleased that we got 24 to fill the survey. The reason why I'm surprised, I was just surprised that people who had already made it to the top felt that they should fill out a survey. But it's very good and very good news that they did. So I'm going to show you the charts of what the results were, but I want to start with just one page and just say what were the key findings, right? And then you'll see the actual data, which I think you'll find interesting. First of all, in terms of the characterization, the first 8 questions, none of that data where we were characterizing the survey respondents showed any statistical aberration or defect that would affect the legitimacy of the survey. If in one category, every 90% said they were over 61 or something like that, you would know there was something wrong with the way that you had conducted it and the people you had sent it to. And at least our view is that there were no signs of any statistical aberration or defect that would affect the validity of the survey. Now, results. Amazing, but 71%, a very high percent of those surveyed felt they had been subjected to career ceiling obstacles due to their ethnicity. 71% is a very high percent. So that tells you a large number of people, these Asian Americans, felt that they had hit some kind of career ceiling obstacle due to their ethnicity as an Asian American. So that's the first observation. When we asked them about what kind of career disadvantage they were subject to, the largest response was job titles and promotion. So in other words, a large number of the respondents said, I didn't get the title or promotion that I feel I deserve along the way, or I don't have the title that I should have given my skills, etc. The second 2 highest, that were very close to each other, were income and nature of work. So in other words, income is, I am not getting paid the same amount that someone who is not Asian American is getting paid. I feel it's unfair. And nature of work, obviously, is the kind of thing they're asking me to do is not commensurate with, my real skills or accomplishments. So the top 3, by far the largest was, I didn't get the title, I didn't get promoted. And then right behind them and tied was,
I was not, I didn't get the right income. I don't have the right income, or didn't get the right income, and the nature of my work was inferior to what it should be. When we went to and then there were others where they weren't cited, or the reasons, that were quite low, and we'll show you that. With regard to what they felt was the cause of their disadvantage, again, the one above was what was the nature of the career disadvantage. When we were asked them what they felt the cause was, the largest reason given by far was connections and networking. Uh, and they just felt that for a variety of reasons, whatever they are, that they had insufficient connections, networking, or mentor, and that was a cause of their career disadvantage. By the way, that's not surprising, because in the 25, 30 or more excuse me, 50 events we've done thus far, many of the panelists and experts cited networking and mentoring as a big handicap of Asian Americans in terms of their success. Surprisingly, though, uh, the next highest category, or tied for the next highest, was own behavior. Now that's interesting. Own behavior means you were the cause, or it was your fault in some way. For example, just you're not aggressive enough, right, relative to what others non-Asians are. So in other words, personal behavior, parenting, personal philosophies such as just work and study hard and you'll succeed, were recognized as major reasons for their career obstacle. Now, that in a way is good news, because at least theoretically, it's easier to change your own behavior and how you raise your children than it is to change organizations, government policies, or societal norms. But equally high, and second place, was the structure of the organization that the respondent was part of. And that makes sense. It says the organizations they worked for or worked for, the way they did promotions, the way they evaluated people was unfair, and created career obstacles to them as Asian Americans. Now, what was surprising to me, and I don't know if it's surprising to you, was two other reasons were relatively low. They weren't zero, but they were relatively low. Language skills, accent was relatively low. So not that many people said, well, I was held back because of my accent or my language skills. And not that many cited immigration status as a reason. So again, sometimes some of these things are very, shall we say, uh, uh, you know, they take your gut feel, and the data supports your gut feel. Others, I would have thought that there were more people said, gee, if I had an accent, that was a problem. When we get to the 0 to 10 questions, the two of them, the first was over the past 5 years on a scale of 0 to 10, at what level of severity do you feel that you've been subjected to Asian American career obstacles? Again, 0 was no impact and 10 was severe impact. What's interesting there was the responses were spread all across the numbers. There were 0 all the way to 10. So there was no major, clustering. There was a slight bump in 7 and 8 category, but otherwise it was spread across the spectrum of responses. That was not true when you went to the question of, do you feel that the current tensions between the US and China and Asia hate incidences have had any impact on your career success? A very large number put in 0, that they did not feel there was an impact. And the rest were spread out evenly in relatively low numbers from 1 to 10. So that's very interesting. In other words, the respondents did not feel that the US-China tensions or Asia hate had a major impact on their career advancement. So those were the major findings, but let me show you the data, because I think the data is actually helps you understand what these findings were. So the first one, of course, was, do you feel that your career success has been impeded in any way because of your ethnicity? And as we said before in the previous slide, 71% said that their career success had been impeded because they were Asian American. This does indicate a serious problem. 71% is a very big, is a very high percentage. So this group clearly felt that it's a problem and it had impeded their career. When we ask people what form of career disadvantage that you feel you have been subjected to, the largest response was this gray part, which was title, advancement, promotion. As I mentioned before, the next highest was income in yellow, and then the next highest was it was the nature of work. By the way, the job applications was not trivial, but it was in fourth place as a career disadvantage that they had cited. When we got to the question of what do you feel the cause was of the career disadvantage, and we asked them to check all that apply. The largest group by far was this yellow part, which is lack of proper connections. So if you want to focus on anything, you got to beef up your skills in terms of networking, connections, and getting a mentor, because that seems to be at least a perception as being the biggest factor for the career disadvantage. Tied for second were in blue was the problems by the organization, right? Discrimination by the organization, and in orange, own behavior. I'll be honest with you, I was very surprised that own behavior was such a high percent. Two reasons. One is people generally don't like to say they are the problem. A lot of people just generally, that's human nature. They tend not to want to say, I created the problem. So the fact that 28% of the responses said own behavior is a very, very interesting result. And it just said that there was a recognition by a large number of those who filled out the survey that they had contributed to the career disadvantage that they faced. Now let's go to the 0 to 10 questions. And the first one was, how severe, at what level of severity do you feel that you've been subjected to? And you'll see there's a broad range. There's some that they said none, but it's spread all the way across from 0 to 10 with a big kind of a bump up in 7 or 8. So if you looked at averages, clearly, the averages were, the people who were 5 and above, were more of the respondents. But still, there are some who felt, it wasn't that severe. If the last 0 to 10 question was, do the current tensions between the US and China and Asia hate have had any impact on your own career success? Here we have a dramatic difference. Take a look at this. 65 said no, 0 said no impact. And then the rest was spread in small numbers. So, there's some who said, severe, but the majority of people, the large number, felt there was no impact. I guess that's good news, although it's not good news that we have Asia hate. But if in fact this is true, that the respondents, their experience represents, the broader group, that's good news. So what are the conclusions and implications of part 1? This is, in other words, the respondents taken as a whole. So first, it is clear, with 71% saying that they've been subjected to career ceiling disadvantages due to the fact that they were Asian American, there is no question that this group overwhelmingly felt that there is the career disadvantage problem based on their race. The 3 highest areas of disadvantage that they felt were promotion titles, income, and the nature of work they were given. And the major reasons cited for what drove that disadvantage, why, the largest was insufficient connections in networking, followed by their own behavior and the structure of the organization. So what are the implications of these, I guess, the big picture findings? One is, it's clear that there's a problem. And but if you look at the respondents and what they feel. A very large percent. But the other implications, because, one wants to understand what kind of problem there is, but it's just as important, maybe more important, to try to say where, if we only have so much time or resources, where should I devote my energies to reduce the problem? And from this survey, it would appear that the respondents said the three areas of greatest problem or organization appear to be organizational change, improving networking and connection skills and pathways, and choosing and changing our own behavior. Those are the clear areas of focus. You want to solve all the problems, but if you only have a certain amount of time and resources, these are the three that you have to focus on. So that is the part one. I'll just show you the title page for part two, which will be December 11th. But basically what we're going to do in part two is we're going to go through the different subgroups, and we're going to say, what was the difference in the answers based on gender, age, level of seniority, and the industry they're in. And you'll find it very interesting if when you go through these slides, there's some real differences depending upon whether you're a teacher or in corporations or a nonprofit, or if you're 60 years old, or if you're 30 years old. There are some very interesting differences, and the vast majority are, shall we, explainable, right? Then we'll go through anecdotes, and it's impossible to list all 131 and 145 written in responses, but we've selected some examples just to give you a feel for what people said about incidences that they felt were worth conveying, and also what they thought were some of the solutions. So with that, I am going to, that's the end of the slides for this. And let me go through some of the questions that you've asked. Hold on. All right. One person said, will this presentation be posted publicly on their website who want to examine this and can't digest it in 45 minutes? By the way, there's no one who could digest all this data in 45 minutes. So you're correct. So the answer is there are two things. One, this video, this is being recorded, and it will be available on the Committee 100 website. But in addition, we're going to publish two things. We're going to publish a executive summary, which may show some charts, but primarily in a couple of pages, say, what did we do and what did we find? And then also these slides will be available publicly. So that, oh, well, a bunch of the people asked a question. So, okay. All right. And I do apologize to anonymous attendee. I am sorry that the letters are so small, but we tried our best to try to make it. Xi Liu says, given this, what does Committee 100 or the Chinese American community plan to address this? I can't speak for the Chinese American community at all, but I can say that Committee 100 has been addressing this since 2020. We have been giving seminars, summits. We've had getting experts together, leaders who are head of nonprofits focus on this issue together to create solutions. So there's a variety of things. There are probably close to 50 events that we've done. The vast majority have been recorded and they're available on the Committee 100 website. But in addition, we have had workshops. We've covered, one was on how do you create connections in networking, or how do you market yourself, or how do you, so forth. So we've had workshops that, by the way, they're all recorded, so you can watch them. We've had summits to create problems, and then we've have a report of all these different solutions, and we've been working on them one by one, trying to see what we can do to implement those. And let's see. Okay. Someone did ask, I'd be curious if respondents think it's a lack of mentor sponsors as they have different roles. Some say it's sponsors that matter for promotions. The answer is we didn't, uh, uh, we could have asked more detailed questions about, different aspects of connections and mentoring, and we may do that in a subsequent survey. But I think we basically recognize that if we made the survey too long, you'd lose the audience. And I'd be very happy to say that of all the people who took the survey, they completed the whole thing. And the problem with many surveys is they stuff 100 questions in, and people just give up. They get tired, and that violates the validity of surveys. Someone asked, is the regional location impact and the answer is, I don't know, because we didn't ask them, we did not ask people where they were located, right? Let's see. Someone said, do you have an email for questions? I guess the answer is just respond through the Eventbrite thing and you will. Okay. Let's see. The idea, Candice says, the idea that Asians blame themselves seems self-gaslighting, seem consistent with a pattern of being abuse victims. So what about getting therapy and training on handling disparate treatment? It's a complicated, Candice, you have a point, and it may be that some of the people who said, yes, it's my own behavior, were self-gaslighting. But it could be that many of them just said, hey, look, I wasn't aggressive enough or whatever. And they just had a very objective feeling that, that they didn't do certain things that they could have done. So it's possible that some of them, but I think in many cases it's just a legitimately say, something, there's some things like in my case, one of the things was I had to rebel against my parents. My parents said, go to MIT, study hard, don't speak up, and then you'll be rewarded. And, I figured out that that wasn't a good idea, but I really had to fight them on it because, there's nothing like strong-willed Asian parents. It's tough to fight back, but I did. And, I think it would have been difficult for me to be successful in the business world if I had followed them. And oh, by the way, they were very upset that I didn't go to MIT, but I didn't, and I went to a different school. But you know, their philosophy is just study science and you'll be okay. Okay. Uh, okay. So, someone said, you mentioned workshops. Are they in person or virtual online? The answer is thus far, we've done them all virtually. But, working on a lot of different things. So, stay tuned. This effort on the part of Committee 100 is a serious effort, and we're doing a lot of different things now focused more on solutions and a little less on analysis. However, I also say that there's some really great organizations out there that are working on this problem too, and that's good because it can't be solved by any one specific organization. Ascend does an excellent job of helping Asian American at different levels succeed in terms of management skills, et cetera. Apex for Youth, there are a whole list of them that do a great job to try to help. So the answer is we're going to try our best to focus on solutions, and there are other organizations. But we also recognize that, there are two things we can do. Do what we've been doing, which is helping people understand the nature of the problem and where it's coming from, but also, find ways to help people solve the problem. So I see that I have gone through all of the questions that were real questions. And so I just want to thank everyone. One of the things I promised was that this part one would be 45 minutes, and it's now 6:42, so it's been 42 minutes. So I think I'm going to keep my promise. Well, maybe there's one more question. Let's see. Okay. All right. There's one person who said, please reply my question, but the nature of the question is such that it's more something that they want for themselves and send their resume. So I'll respond to that separately, but obviously it's not a group. It's not a group question. So thank you all for joining this evening. I hope you found this helpful, and it will be available as a recorded video, and we will be issuing an executive summary and a report, and let everyone know and have access to it when let's see, and we'll let you know when it's. And I encourage you to sign up for part two, which is December 11th at 6 o'clock, and sign up, because I think you're going to find part two, which is by subgroup. What are the differences in opinion by age, by gender, by type of profession, etc. So with that, I want to wish you all a good evening, and thank you very much for joining me this evening.